150 years ago, much of that part of the United States known as the Ohio Valley was still a wilderness, but it was as familiar as a neighborhood park to one man. His name was Johnny Appleseed. He most often traveled on foot and always carried a leather sack filled with apple seeds. He planted these seeds in little patches in the wilderness wherever he went, for Johnny felt that fruit was one of God's great gifts to man. He saw it as his job to sow the seeds that would assure a ready supply of this fruit for the settlers who were just then beginning to turn their faces westward. Many of the trails that were later followed by these settlers to the west were first blazed by Johnny Appleseed in his wanderings. The beauty of nature was the only thing that really mattered to Johnny. He usually went barefoot, despite brambles, stones, and bad weather. Once a settler, seeing him plodding barefooted through the snow in midwinter, gave him a pair of shoes, only to meet him a few days later, again barefooted. "Where were the shoes?" the man asked. Well, it seems that Johnny had come upon a poor family that needed shoes worse than he did. For some years, his clothing consisted of cast-offs given him by settlers, but later on he decided on a coffee sack with holes cut in it for his arms and his head, and for a hat, he often wore the pan he used to cook his dinner in. Everyone respected Johnny, even the Indians who never harmed him, for they admired his courage and his love of nature. The settlers liked him because of his kindness and humility, and even the boys of the small, rough towns never teased Johnny, despite his strange appearance. He was also a great favorite of the little girls, because he usually managed to have a scrap of ribbon or a piece of calico to give them. No matter where he might be, he was always welcome in a remote cabin to stop for a night's lodging. The Indians didn't bother Johnny even during the War of 1812, when they roamed the countryside as British allies to burn out the settlers. For that reason, Johnny was able to act as sort of a Paul Revere, warning the farmers of the approach of Indian and British marauders, giving them time to take refuge in the fortified blockhouses. Although Johnny rarely had any possessions of his own, he was seldom completely without money, for he charged those settlers who could afford it a small price for his little groves of seedlings. Johnny, however, spent almost nothing of what he earned on himself, preferring to use his money to help animals. Often on the frontier, a settler's horse or his livestock had a cruel time of it, frequently being turned out to die when sick. Hearing of such a case, Johnny would buy the animal from its owner, nurse it back to health, then give it to someone else on the condition that it be well treated. Once, when Johnny found a wolf caught in a trap and badly hurt, he released it and nursed it back to health. The wolf became a pet and followed Johnny about like a dog. An old hunter used to tell that he'd come upon Johnny in the deep wood, playing with 3 bear cubs while the mother bear calmly looked on. Perhaps the bear was the same one that Johnny had befriended one cold night when he had built his campfire at the end of a hollow log. He had intended to crawl into the log for the night, but discovered that a bear and her cubs were already there. "Poor innocent things," Johnny is said to have remarked. "I'm glad I didn't turn you out of your house." He then carefully removed his fire and slept on the snow. The years went by, and the trees planted by Johnny grew and were heavy with the fruit in the autumn. Throughout the Ohio Valley, the orchards provided their bounty of apples for farmers as well as wayfarers who traveled Johnny's frontier trails. Johnny's fame spread throughout the country, and by the time of his death, he had already become a legendary figure. Many people felt that Johnny didn't really exist, but had only been made up in the tales told by the folks. But then one day, a little boy would be walking in the fields with his dog, and suddenly, there would be Johnny, with a smile and a story and an apple seed for the boy to plant. A seed which would grow and mature with the boy, and which he could always call his very own. As more and more settlers came west, they were greeted in the spring by the pink flowers of Johnny's trees, and the new land that they had come to seemed less strange and frightening. The trees were Johnny's message to them, saying, "There's no need to fear. I have passed this way, and the land is good."